But Claire's is up as well. I don't understand. Oh. Right. So I'm gonna record this. You okay with that? But do you wanna see what angle you want to? Because, for example, my. So do you want it from that angle or that angle?
Yeah, I'm going to regret it. I'm not going to look
at it. Just be aware that it's there. Some people like completely ignore it and start walking around. Just checking if, yeah. I will. Are you all ready, guys?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, let's get started. So, huge welcome to you all, and especially to our two guests. Well, a semi-guest and a real guest, Rosie Šnajdr. I want to ask about that surname. And Clare Fisher. I've got some bad news because of the British railway system and all its pros and cons. Gareth Gavin can't make it tonight. We got stuck in Manchester, waiting for about 3 or 4, 5 trains, and they all got delayed. And basically, logistically, there was no way for him to make this reading. Apologies about that, but we're still gonna have a fantastic evening together. Regarding Gareth Gavin, I've already got some ideas as to how to reschedule, so potentially for February. So with huge pleasure, I'm going to introduce Rosie first. Is that the deal? And then Clare, who you all know. And we're not going to have a break in between the two readings. Each will last about 15 to 20 minutes. It will depend on your moods, guys, and how generous you feel tonight or exhausted. And after that, I thought we could just have a little chat. So maybe if you haven't got yet any questions, try and sort of think with the readings and the writings and the texts and come up with anything you want to, from something very basic to more complicated queries or interrogations. I've got some already. So also to say, this is very important, that we've got books here. This is our little book store, or bookstore. So we've got work by Rosie. Do you want to say which one this is?
That's called Whorl the Prudident Slipt.
Oh my God, this looks amazing. Mm-hmm. And
it's quite an experimental book. Quite a lot of the work in that is to do with exploring ways that narrative can work with image specifically, so like a concrete prose, to try and...
Okay, so this is on sale.
It is on sale, but no one will ever be able to find it because it's called Whorl the Prudident Slipt.
No, I mean,
my surname is Šnajdr.
If anybody wants to buy it today, we can.
Yes, absolutely.
Spare them up. And I should also say that we are sort of Sheffield-wise launching Clare's new collection by Sword. So we are here to celebrate that as well. And that's on sale tonight too. At the end of the conversation, please do come up and purchase everything you can afford tonight. Okay. So I'm going to introduce Rosie first and then Clare. Rosie Šnajdr writes experimental short fiction. She's written 2 short story collections, A Hypocritical Reader. This was a 2018 publication by Dostoyevsky Wannabe, and Whorl the Prudident Slipt, which came out in 2021 by Veer, both, which we'll talk about a little bit, experimental small presses. And Rosie is currently working on a mosaic novel of stories and fragments called Telepathic Greenland Shark. Rosie Šnajdr co-edits the Cambridge Literary Review and is also senior lecturer in creative writing at the University of Greenwich. Huge welcome to you, Rosie. We don't really need an introduction to Clare, but I will do it anyway. Clare Fisher is a fiction writer and creative writing lecturer. Her debut collection, All the Good Things, was a 2017 Viking and Penguin publication. This one, I'm reading what you've given me, and this one a Betty Trask award, and was described by The Guardian as a sparky and unsettling debut. Clare's short story collection, which we are here to celebrate tonight, How the Light Gets In. No. We are not here to celebrate that one, but I am sort of secretly and privately celebrating this as well. The 2018 Influx Press publication. This specific book was longlisted for the Edgehill Short Story Prize and the International Dylan Thomas Prize. And now the real celebratory text here is The Moon is Trending, which Clare is going to be reading from today. This was a 2023 sort publication. All over to you now. Rosie, let's start with Rosie.
So I'm going to be reading 3 stories, I think, from Whorl the Prudident Slipt. We're going to start off with one called Bingo the Drunk Man, which is probably the piece that I wrote longest to go. Essentially what it is, it's a bingo game for lesbians to play in a pub when they're being bothered by a drunk straight man. It was inspired by my 10th anniversary. Okay, so I will actually pop it up on the screen because some of the work can be helpful to see. Okay. In arrears, ear rent, the night errant. Errant night rent by drunk man, erring. Error prone, drunk man's speech wound, wound round in inner ear, inertia reels, whirring. Errand of mercy me, oh drunk man, I hate you, get up. Errata 1. Drunk man, mercy me. Legitimate object of objection, I am, not he. Unwounding the capacity to wound, avowing the wound's legitimacy. Gendering the wound's legitimacy. I am, not he. 2. Drunk man mercy breaks no he, no he him, okay once there was hoo, a he hoo, whopper, whirling, whoring, hoo, no homo but once. A real man can slip, a real man shtick, sticking in inertia reels, a real man can, drunk man can broke, no he. 3. Marry her, why won't you marry her? You can, you know, it's fine. I will buy you a drink. No, thank you, drunk man, I hate you, get up. Number 4. Drunk man have many ho-ho friend, homo fiend, homo fend, homo filler, homo fonta, he, hoo-hoo friend. A teen girl, screen girl, on lustrate. A teen girl, screen girl, good friend time, a her, with purple hair. You know her? No? So much in common, incoming, so much in common, incoming. Tell me what you do in bed. Fine. How do you do? How do you do it? The he do in the do. Said that I did that once, no homo. How do you do? How do you hoo do though? How do hoo do the do? Wandering wets the point. 6. The error-man reels wearing to stimulus us, a seminal premise. Here is the curacy, a curate to malt our bitter, a wand-waving pastor-man's seminary promise. Teach us a lesson, a bit of who's your father, father's all you need, a bit of how's father to turn us right, to turn again, to turn and not to turn. Teach us to sit still. That ternary premise, a bit of fool, a bit of fool, a bit of house, fool, the fool, house. You'll notice that I like puns. So, okay, so I think we'll move on from that to a piece called Nothing. It's untitled. And so a lot of, how can I make this smaller? How's that? It's not going to be very readable, but it's more the shape of this one, I think. So really, in this book, I'm quite interested in the impossible idea of writing non-linear narrative. And one of the ways that I was exploring that was to have two narratives and try not to give one of them prominence over the other, and try to make them relate to each other so that something was happening with the reading process that wasn't linear. So this is something that I'm doing in a few places in this book. It's kind of a theme. This one was kind of commissioned for an anthology called Utopia. And the people who were putting together this book wanted kind of visions of utopia, and they were quite spiritual people, quite new age. So I knew a lot of the work in there would be very new age. Nothing if not a bit of an idiot. So I decided that I would theme mine cyborg. So what I've done here is I've got kind of a narrative on one side of the honeycomb, the welding, the eggs, which is cell division, and on the other side, machine welding. So the idea is that together they're kind of a cyborg text. Okay. Data to datum, cleave zygote to dataset. Cleaves, zygotes to morrelate, mutualist bauble. Sub-histories of interphase, somatic cells fatten and copy. Sister chromatids, hipped at centromere, ever diploid, field of butterflies. Setting sun of nucleolus as nuclear membrane breaks down, prophase. And centrosomes migrate, polar forces of animal magnetism, sister chromatids on parade. Spindles out from organelles to centromeres of chromatids, metaphase. Microtubules heave in fission. 7 axes of freedom, hip, arm, elbow, arm, wrist, wrist, tool flange. Dual robotic welding solution. Neck of swan in flame retardant orange, breathes blue flame. Another presses together unsealed steel with dreams of fusion, of cold welding. As nanowires kiss into coalescence, so might they neutralize their currency of electrons without this lumber of oxygen to cleave through. Sister, sing to me. Flame, tip, touch, igniting the slag rod. Under heat, a common pool, merging beneath the flux. So that's my untitled one. we've got one more, which is the story from... I'll make this any bigger without ruining it, probably. So this is the title story from my book, and it is the dreams of President, and it sticks in my throat, President Trump, written whilst he was still in office. And I kind of thought, when Joe Biden took over the presidency, well, that's good, but it's not very good for my story, because now it's a bit out of date. But I've been looking at the polling and being kind of like, this could be useful again. But essentially, it's horrible even to say it, I'm sorry. This is in a homophonic punning style, kind of with inspiration drawn from James Joyce's style in Finnegan's Wake, but really more through an imitator of his, well, not an imitator, someone who worked within his style and updated it, which is William Melvin Kelly, and his book Dunford's Travels Everywheres. And the reason I say it's more like his work is I don't have the linguistic capability to use many languages, and it's a bit more political than parts of James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake is. Yeah, so let's have a go. So punning. I said I like punning, didn't I? Okay. And this is really hard to read, so forgive me. Okay. Whorl the Prudident Slipt, the wild still turned. Thus Prudident, with a fate large enough to whack the deed, rolled over, and the Russians ruled over, and one fall out. Cocked to the floor, Joycynth McCoffavey spins unterred at the bawdy parlour trick that vetoed for thus predicament. But he can confirm there are no more reds under the bed. So the Prudident drums his drums, slipping the slap of the innocent. All the Prudident's drums are spinside by phone loose, so thank of their logo when tarning the purge. And now we go, live into the ears of the leader of the free will. Drum number one is toxic masculinity. Under the felds of the pretty dance aisle come to pain. Under the folds of the fast bully, an insurrection rises. The fast brand drums an erotic drum. The Dunold is pole dancing on the tip of the Undire Straits bulldog, like a Suxicon king. And all the men and women of the USS Hay are shoring the Dinalt in gold. In this dirty drum, having fallen for the Prudident's cock and bull stirry, hooker, line and stinker, the American public crim tox dollars in hus G-strong. With every single sense, the Prudident's phallus gets schlonga. What begun as a mire toadstool becomes a weepon. Whence the forced pucker retches full mast, it Shadell Jones's hover Chunny's hairpiece. At the sight of thus, the head of states belows its word, a hurt stalky mass unto ignoreth carrera. In reality, it is the fibrack of the first hinderpence that gets stuffer, and the Prudident just riles over and shops on. When finished. Sorry. The larder of the fried wort is macking the moist of this shit dawn. This drum has silver tries, hyped with first food, but the brisket buller's couch is delayed. There will be so hungry, he flunks, smelling to himself, as he tucks the pridential notekin into his chine and unrips a burger. Drum number two is hickory's speckled hum, his barbecued rub-eye is a sad hors of freeze slathered in ketchup. It is the undigested steaks of Amurica. The Prudident begins to chow the carna of his paleo. The fast stomach is growelling. Rid lops, rid haw, weight around the oys, there is a clan in the wet halls. Raddled McDaddled, raising some Gouldon urges in the Rouge gridiron. The evil orifice will be the newest franchise restaurant. Dinald McReynolds behind the counter, flipping the Bilderbergers and slivering them in the secrete SARS. The whole plus smiling nicely of Hout oil. That's as bitter than democratic Poetics, he thinks, pulling up his clam trousers and stuffing handfuls of Puerto Freeze into his durbling mouth. Another derp of drabble lending splush into the ire of Joyce McCothaway, who has begun short-circuiting on the floor. I've never read this one before. I hate this. It's okay, because it's long. Is everyone still weak? Okay. I'm having fun. In this drum, the what house is full of peepals. They are wheat winds, brain winds, black horns, and their languish is hell out of the place. They are speaking Spanish, Mexican, Dominican, they're speaking African, they're Turking, Arabian, and Chernite. It's scurrying me. So I told them, I shite at them, Hammer Icon, I only understand Hammer Icon. And these reply, oh, we spark American too, Mr. Pesterdonk. Indeed, most of us spark it much better than the pestilence of the untied tapesters. We are North American biters, and we come to repossess this house from you. But I am the pastodence of the humited straits, I sod, and called up the police. The police arrived with stocks, and teasers, and dags, and targus, and whiter cannons, and robber billets, and guns, and hearses, and tonks, and Apache helicopters, and nuclear submarines, and comical whirlpins. The constable seized them, ate them up, and made them felons who you could not cost a bullet. And so the pry-tasters were vanquished before you could say naga. And however was ganging to fight for me, preferably just the cleaver rust wheat ones, I think, vited for me anyway. And together, as polio shouted, ticky-tock waving, knit I re-put, knit, wit, supremacist, pea-piles, will mark Homercia rate. Erxit the prouder lamp, stooge laughed to chants of mugger. There's more. What? Doesn't the Prudident Stickly Ranchons mutter nevermore? In the strum, which is Raleigh and Notmeyer, the Whithurst is on a gelded toilet. Briefs rankles. The skirlet toy is derping in the witter, pray-serving her smoothly. The chuff executive is preparing to talk his morning shout. He opens his favourite crapplication as he lastens his heinous. Today I will tweef hominity a puck cheer of my shooty ears. So long since I was appalled for doing my baseness like a bog boy. But as the commenter and cheat retched for his selfish stuck, his marble fan ponged. As he whacked yesterday's orders from the scram, his toilet fund gave him the news. You have been permanently banned from Twitter. So it is a bit out of date, unfortunately. The cooler of the President's fast goose from orange to brute red, and not just from the corn syrup pain shine. Oh, the poosage to his fellow arse is Earl backed up. The faced bully ates, being so full of corrupt. The louder of the phrase wailed oil bills proturd as he vainly straggles, swatting like an elephant. The herder he troys to queeze art hars opinion, the fester it gets struck. Rousing with mere relief, the pissy dink hungrily pulls up his truthers, prays until the echo of his chamber, tutor losses, is tame to murk mum's not ripe again. This is the last one. Very last one. Thank you for humouring me. In this lost drum, the dumb old is playing golf. He is ordering the US traipse to rat term, tolling them to fill up their suitcases with the oils of Whorl. He is selling arms to Soldier Arabia. He is relocating the harm American embassy. He is appealing to the ricket man of unearthed core here. He is refrigerating tried retaliations with China. He is stirring his bogey hill over the greens, tuning it up. He is devoting the gross by selecting the uncorrupt goof clapper. He does what he polices on his self-owned gaff curse. Funnily, after some very treble duels past, the Mexicahonas cunningly iffered the fens to put up a whale around the links. Now Tramp is trucked. He's swinging his non-urn and scramming out of the whale about who's knitted lord in. Mexicans, greys, Muslims, purple of cooler, womb bones, thanking off the herds that must be missed all spite. But beyond the barrier, like in merger Russian die and the political really Tulsa, there is really only the empty space, tumblewards, and the solemn stradulation of race hopers.
I now understand why you wanted this.
Yeah, it does help. It does help. Do you want me to shut it down, or would you like a moon behind you?
Fine.
It's pretty cool.
Not sure how to go after that. Not sure what I should read. I mean, I thought my stories were a bit strange, but I think you take it to the next levels. Okay, I'll read, so this collection, quite a lot of the stories are kind of like one massive blurgy paragraph with a really long sentences in. Dare I say it, almost edging towards prose poetry, although I don't call myself a poet. But some of them are kind of longer and more story-like. So I'm going to read a little bit from one towards the end called Who's There? I won't read the whole thing, I'll just stop when I've had enough. In my head, a knocking. The gaps between each knock were such that you could tell the knocker was pissed off. I was good at telling such things because I grew up in a house where the doorbell was always about to be fixed. But bodies are not houses, and the only person inside mine was me. So I sauteed onions, and I set a phone reminder to hang up the washing as soon as it was done. And I chatted to my friends who liked to be checked in on. And I told my boyfriend I'd fuck him as soon as I'd finished reading this page. And you would think that all these verbs would knock the knocker away from the door of me, but it did not. My boyfriend fell asleep as soon as he came. And wanting to watch the cum dry on his leg hairs, I rolled over. Picked up my book, but the knocker was pushing the letters out of its words off its pages. I dropped it on the carpet. I picked it up, dropped it again, hard. I wanted it to wake my boyfriend up, but his breathing deepened. His body was doing all the miraculous REM healing, whilst I was still being played by this mystery knocker. I dashed to the bathroom, hoping at last to confront him. But in the mirror, I did not see the huge, hairy fist I'd expected. I did not see any of my childhood friends' mothers, their foreheads wrinkled and rain damp. I did not see Jim, my very first boyfriend, crying because he thought I stood him up. But I didn't see a 30-year-old woman either. First, I saw the breasts. They'd been stuck on, clumsily, by a toddler, or someone who'd made them whilst also, for example, watching a TV show about a well-to-do family who become drug pushers whilst cross-stitching. The face wasn't mine either. There was another face inside it. It wanted to get out, and I wanted to help it. When I lunged at the glass, it disappeared. There was a big red spot by my eyebrow. I squeezed it, but it wasn't ready. And although I knew it wasn't ready, I kept squeezing it. I thought it might coax the knocker out, but no. All that came was blood, and so much that the next morning, my manager pulled me to one side and asked, "Is everything okay at home?" "Yeah," I said, then began to cry. "Your boyfriend seems nice," she said, "but you never know." I couldn't say about the knocker, nor about how I'd been desperate for him to leave. And yet, now that he had, I felt like the loneliest person in the world. which is a feeling I thought I'd left in the house with the broken bell. My stomach ached. I'm about to get my period. She sighed like she was disappointed I was not, in fact, a victim of sexual violence. Okay, well, maybe take some codeine or something? I mean, I want to kill everyone for like 10 days before mine, which actually has been the last 10 days. You wouldn't have guessed, would you? Actually, I said, when you pressed that slice of coffee cake into my hand, even though I just said I didn't like coffee cake, and you said, try it, it's delicious, not daring to admit that you just wanted me to stay late to finish that project you'd guilt-tripped me into working on, I felt like you did want to kill me. She looked at her feet, then at me, then back at her feet. Maybe you should see the doctor. I spent the rest of that day going over and over that moment, but I still couldn't tell who said those words, me or the knocker. Stop that. Okay, now I'm going to read a very, very short one. Living the dream. And a few of these things did actually start off as a real dream, and then it kind of came into a story. Not one of the 24 angry faces would tell me why I was in the mansion, or why, even though I was the cause of the anger, they would not let me leave. They stood shoulder to shoulder, with their feet planted wide and their arms folded. If they hadn't looked so serious and been wearing clothes that imbued the word frumpy with several extra itchy layers of reality, I'd have taken them for parody gangsters. When it became clear they still weren't going to move, I sat down on the carpet, which was very red and very, very soft, and I closed my eyes. I dug my fingers into the red, red soft. I began to feel that my being there wasn't such a problem after all. Then a smelly new wetness appeared on my left calf. I opened my eyes. A tiny monkey was crouched there, shitting. The shit was reddish brown and liquid. I screamed. I stood up. Someone pushed me back down, and the monkey's claws dug right through my jeans and my skin, and now its shit was mixing with my blood. And I shook my leg, but it dug harder, and I jumped up and down, but it shook harder still. And I must have been screaming help because the non-gangsters were saying, we can't, you've done this to yourself. You only need to calm down and accept what fate is bringing to you. And the shit was now seeping inside my sock. This isn't the time for philosophy, I said. And they said that much was obvious, and they hated philosophy. It was so removed from the realities of life. They all stared at the monkey shit when they said life. And by this point, I was so tired, I lay down and closed my eyes and stopped trying to change myself or anything. And just when I thought I'd dissolved into the carpet, they started to clap. I opened my eyes. The non-gangsters were now standing in 2 neat rows on either side of the doorway. You're free to go. But the thought of going back into the world that was so much bigger than this mansion and contained so many more disgusting and frumpy creatures was no longer so appealing. Sure, I said. Could I first have a shower? Of course, it was one of those rainforest ones which destroy 10 miles of the Amazon with every use. It was glorious. Okay, now I'm going to read an extract from something that's not in here, controversially. It's a kind of weird creative essay thing I wrote that was recently published in this Irish journal called Tulpa, which publishes creative nonfiction, or I think they call it generically promiscuous text, so quite a range of stuff. So yeah, I'll just read a little extract from that. It's called Caterpillar. You would like to tell a story about your body and how it is not real. You would like to tell a story that feels real in the way your body would feel real, were your body a real body. The problem is, you don't know how to tell stories that feel real in the way bodies feel real, because all your body feels is other people's bodies and the story they tell about them. The problem is, you mistake such stories for your own. The problem is, you shove such mistakes between the exam certificates in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet in the back room of the house in which you grew not up. The problem is, you grew not up. The problem is, these problems don't make the sorts of problems that make a story. And even if they, by some magic, did, you couldn't make them into some other, more real body, because bodies aren't made out of stories. They're made out of things like fats, like white blood cells, like snot, like bones, like eyelashes, like elbow wrinkles, like blood that looks like snot but black. The problem is, these things are tangled with unthings, like verbs, like feelings, like verbs which do things with feelings, like make your cheeks sting whenever you remember your memory of being a boy. It's not a memory in the way that your friends voting you the ugliest girl is. The problem is, if this problem is neither a body nor a story, then what kind of problem are you? All you can say for sure is that the filing cabinet was red, like a tomato that refuses to ripen. You would like to tell a story about your body and how it is not real because it is your cousin Ben's body. Specifically, it's your cousin Ben's body as he practices karate, swiping at the air between his body and the body of your mum and his mum, who are sisters, which means they both came out of their mum's body, which is weird when you think about it, which you mostly don't. Sorry, I was going to skip a bit with that, but nothing else will work. Just like you mostly don't think about pooing and how everyone does it, even famous people like Julie Andrews, who plays Maria in The Sound of Music, which you watch every night before bed. But it's not the story of how you need the story that is Julie Andrews rescuing 7 rich orphans from loneliness and motherlessness, and even the Nazis that you wanted to tell. It's the story of your cousin and how his karate suit is so white, it scorches the backs of your eyeballs. You see it when you go to sleep in your cousin's squeaky spare bed. You see it when you wake up to the sound of your mum's voices crashing into each other. You see it when your mum bundles you, still pajamaed, into a taxi. You see it in the open-mouthed silence that is your mum's response to the question of when you'll next visit. Your own pajamas are blue and red and yellow with tiny black tractors all over them. But if you turn them inside out, they're almost white. And when you leap around your mum's house, it feels almost as big as your aunt's house and your arms almost as long as Ben's. So eccentric, your mum says, when she understands that the inside-out pajamas have become another of your habits. You do not tell her why you wear them inside out. You do not tell anyone. The not telling makes the feeling that turning your pajamas inside out will make the feeling that your body is Ben's body more real. The not telling is a spell. Ta-da. You would like to tell a story about your body and how it is not real because it is not a human body, but the body of a caterpillar, specifically the one in the picture book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. The Very Hungry Caterpillar eats 1 apple on Monday, 2 pears on Tuesday, 3 plums on Wednesday, 4 strawberries on Thursday, and 5 oranges on Friday. Each day, he is bigger and hungrier than the day before. On Saturday, he eats a chocolate cake, an ice cream cone, a pickle, a slice of Swiss cheese, a slice of salami, a lollipop, cherry pie, a sausage, a cupcake, and a watermelon. On Sunday, he eats 1 green leaf. At last, he is full. He builds himself a little brown house where he sleeps. He wakes up a beautiful butterfly. Ta-da! The difference between you and the book caterpillar is that you'll never get to Sunday. You'll never wake up a beautiful butterfly. At 11, you know this the same way you know the word girl is the most nonsense of all the words. You like to mutter it until it resembles the scraps of tissues that fall out of your school bag. For the first 10 years of your life, you ate the way the caterpillar ate on the weekdays. You ate this way because sweets were bad and your mum was good for giving you wholemeal sandwiches and salt and shake crisps without the salt, and rice cakes and sugarless carrot cake instead. You liked these things, you really did. But now you want to eat chocolate cake and ice cream and lollipops and ice cream and more. Time is divided into the time you are eating sweet things and the time you are not. You'll never fall, not even when your stomach physically hurts. No way could you do with just 1 leaf. You think about this while you're reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to the toddlers next door. When you're done, their mum offers you a chocolate eclair. You eat it so quickly you don't taste it. As you're about to finish the second, she says, "Oh, enjoy those hollow legs, you won't have them forever." Your own mum says something similar when you bought that miniskirt last week. She's always reminding you you'll soon fill out. She's wrong though, they all are, because in your body, it will be Saturday forever.
Are you going to stand?
Or should we go ahead and
There's one chair. You want to sit? Do you want to sit?
No, it's fine.
Okay, I'll
It's a
sit.
bit weird about this. Yeah, you sit down. We'll stand.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. So I've got a couple of questions, but do you want to start, guys? Yes. No, sorry.
Actually, yeah, I do.
Go on.
It's for Rosie. So, when you were writing specifically, I'm going to get the names wrong. It was the first one, so the drunk man.
Oh, Bingo the Drunk Man.
Yeah, Bingo the drunk man and the cyborg and they kind of, the first one felt very like prose poetry-esque, and then like the chemical kind of cyborg shape. When you were writing them, were you thinking about the kind of poetic kind of sound to them, or did that come quite naturally when writing them as prose, or is it like a hybrid of both?
I'd say with those two pieces of work, I probably was thinking about that quite a lot, because what I really wanted to capture in Bingo the Drunk Man was kind of that kind of joke of the slurring and the repeating. And as I was kind of thinking about that man who was sat down at our table whilst having a drink on our 10th anniversary, wouldn't go away. I thought he was starting to sound a bit like Gertrude Stein's work. So I thought when I thought, you know, there's a piece in this, I was thinking, well, that would be a nice way to bring that thought in. And with kind of Utopia, because it's kind of a cyborg, I didn't want to make it very human. So I wanted to kind of stick to very factual terms that aren't loaded with emotional content, and actually words that don't provoke emotional content in most audiences. Like there's going to be some, I don't know how much I got it right, but I tried really hard to learn the science enough to get the words and describe the process, but I haven't dared test it with a scientist. But there's a very small percentage of people who will actually read that and feel, and I didn't want it to be a feeling text, so I thought those, so those pieces, definitely, that was, yeah. Cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Zo. Anyone else? Go on.
My question is also for Rosie, sorry, Claire, but Claire teaches me, so this on the second one, the contact walk, first I'd say I was astounded by how creative and out there all of you writing was. It makes me, not in a bad way, it makes me feel really mundane. I was like, wow. Like everyone was so distinct, it was really quiet. But on the second one, also I went to med school, so
oh no.
I was listening and I was like, I don't like it. But
Okay.
I didn't, don't worry, I wasn't listening like it. But I was interested why you picked the honeycomb.
Yeah, okay, so partially there's a process behind this book as well, because I started writing in this visual format before I knew how to use any tools to write in a visual format. And actually, this untitled work is a very early work in the process of kind of using visuals to delinearize, if you will, narrative. And it, let me find I got a lot better at it, but that was very early on, so it had to be simple, because I was just starting to teach myself how to use InDesign, and I kind of felt like I wanted a symmetrical structure, so as not to prioritize them. Again, because it's quite an artificial narrative, I wanted something that was a pattern. And then I thought about the idea that it's about welding and breaking away, like cell division and welding. So I kind of wanted a shape that was not together but had tension. So it's not, I call it honeycomb. It's not supposed to be honeycomb, but it does look like that, which was fine. Yeah, so I think that's kind of my thoughts on that.
That's so cool.
Go on, Lee.
Yeah, I was just curious about the Trump one. I really loved it, and I'm trying to read Ulysses at the moment, and I'm just curious, like what that process is like, just writing that. Like I flick through Finnegan's Wake and it's just mad.
It is mad, yeah.
And do you kind of signed out and then do you kind of plan it, or does it? I'm just curious what the process is like.
It was a weird one because I had to. It's a kind of writing where you really have to get into a headspace for it. Yeah. So I wrote that in. I couldn't write anything else whilst I was writing it, and I don't think I could sit down and write a page of that now, because you have to. It's quite a slow process at first and gets quicker when you start just sitting in a chair. Or I work in a chair. Lots of people work in a chair. That's normal. Yep. So when I'm sitting in my working chair, I started off kind of being like, well, I kind of want to say this, and then I'm like, what does that sound like that's subverting the meaning of that? What can I make replacements with? And it was slow, and it just got faster and faster until it seemed quite natural at the end. By the time it was finished, but it seems like a really hard creative space to get into and also to get back into, even though I've done that now. So yeah, it was very strange, and it kept my head buzzing with sounds alikes the whole time. So I don't recommend it.
I think sort of like created a new language, sort of teach yourself a new language, and kind of like be in the world of Trump, this sort of like parallel world to Trump. Trump Gertrude saying like love Trump.
Oh, that sounds awful.
What is it?
I was going to say you could do a really funny dementia-ridden Biden one.
Oh God, yeah. Let's hope I get the chance to. Quite frankly, that would be great. I'm down for that.
Cool. Okay, I'm just going to focus weird and elongated. Usually I ask very elongated questions, which are not questions actually, just a reflection. And then you can sort of reflect on the reflection if you wish. But listening to both of you and also reading both fiction and poetry. So, there used to be this like, there is the poets and there is the fiction writers and the novelists versus the poet. And certainly during my writing life, it seems to me that you guys are doing the same we are doing. So sort of the genres are exploding from inside, but poetry and prose are certainly the type we are talking about. We are talking about experimental fiction and the experimental poetry. It's sort of like coming closer and closer. So your work could easily be published, both of yours, particularly your the one in the Irish paper. It seems to me that these sort of demarcations, thankfully in many ways, are disappearing. So that's a reflection. You can sort of reflect on, but then I want to still see. So there's a beautiful word or line, I'm actually quoting someone or paraphrasing, but it seems to me sometimes when we say about the experimental poetry, it remembers the lyric, but it's now moving away from it. Same here, it remembers the novel, but it's moving away from it. Am I right? And also, what the fuck happened to storytelling? I mean, there's no story. Certainly the lead narrative, we know this since obviously the modernists, and then of course 60s and all of that, but there's a lot of explosions here when it comes to, I don't know, rules is the bad word, but not even traditions, it's something else is going on. So am I right when I kind of come up with all these, but also what happened to the story? What happened to fiction? What happened to the novel?
I mean,
I've got thoughts.
Okay, there's a lot to say. What happened to that like walking to Waterstones? There's loads of novels.
Oh well, but I don't walk into Waterstones. Yeah.
Well, if you want to read a novel, go there, or just like the one I just meant. Like if Gary could be here, like you'd be reading.
No, I don't want to read a novel, but what I think it's happening now out there.
I don't know. I feel like in prose, it's still like the novel is still like the dominant form in like the industry. I feel like short stories or kind of generically ambiguous prose is still a bit more fringe, although like creative non-fiction is having a bit of a moment as well. But I don't know, I feel like in my own work, and I think in quite a lot of work I've read, I feel like this is sort of conflict between like almost seeing like narrative as getting in the way of the truth or the way of something.
No, this is exactly
But
what
then,
I
but at the
wanted to
same, but then at the
explain.
same time, like I love stories. Like I can't like let go of it completely, and I think there's still something I sort of wrestle with, sort of wanting to let go of it, but also still wanting that. I suppose some are trying to explore that, like why would you want a story? Why would you not want a story? That kind of tension between it. I don't think stories just being rejected completely. And actually, I think even still a lot of prose, it might appear not to have a story. It does have a story. It's just smaller, or they redefine it. What is a story, or what is an appropriate like size thing to be looking at. But I think I agree with the point of like sort of genre formal categories aren't as well. I don't know what it was like, but it does seem like they're not as far apart, right? And I think a lot of things that you might class as poetry, you could class it as prose or vice versa. And
certainly with particularly your
yeah,
visual,
like, yeah.
that could go as concrete poetry
Yeah.
easily, or visual poetics. And then there is that, for me, it reminded me of Stein, the prose, the world poems.
Yeah.
It's just like a real head fuck, seriously, but this is absolutely, so where not the story is in the focus, but language itself.
Yeah.
And the sort of multidimensional core, sort of simultaneous sort of layers working at the same time. It's like, what a genius, really. So what do you think?
I think in general, I'd agree with Claire in terms of there's a really bustling popular market in very traditional literary realist novels, and they win all the prizes. And
I know that, and it's the same, in poetry as
yeah, of course.
But I'm not talking about the prize-winning literature here.
So I'd say my first book, very much more stories. My second book, I was working around the same time when one of my favourite novel writers, Isabel Weidner, brought out her first book, and it was quite successful for an experimental book. And I just brought out my book, and I felt I tried really hard with that book to not be quite so experimental, to try and temper my experimentalism, not this one, the one before, to temper my experimentalism into something more narrative, to respect the forms a little bit more. And then when I saw that Isabel Weidner could do something so exciting and people would like it, I was just like, right, my new book is going to be exactly what I want to do. And that meant that I wasn't really that bothered about writing a short story in a traditional way, even though I kind of knew that that would push my work into a publishing cul-de-sac. I was just like, I just really want to do something that's right for me.
So that actually leads me to the next question, your final line there. So, because I think both Claire and I do try and push our own writers to the experimentation. But then it clashes with that, what you've just said, with like, how am I going to find, and this is like more like for these guys who want to publish, but also want to experiment. And I can say that in poetry it's easier because there is now hundreds of small press publishing houses which will take experimental work rather than sort of, I'm so sorry for the word, I don't like this, but let's just for now, for the sake of ease, mainstream poetry. But I also have noticed it started happening in fiction too, when it comes to small press.
Very much so.
Can you just say a little bit?
Yeah, totally.
So both of you, like I know Sword started as an experimental. I remember Sword when even from the what was it, 90s or certainly it's been going on. And then it stopped for a while, but it started as an experimental poetry press. And now it's an experimental poetry and fiction or prose small press. Dostoyevsky Wannabe, I know because I remember it started existing about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Probably a couple of years before.
And Isabel is the publisher, isn't it?
No, it's Richard Brammer and his partner Vicky, whose surname I've forgotten. And I think they might have closed their doors now, unfortunately. But they were working out of Manchester and working on
Is it over?
I think so. I mean, you can still get all of the books because they did print on demand model through Amazon, which is the only way they're able to have a viable model for publishing experimental fiction was by not doing print runs, which I think is a really cool way forward. And I think there are a few more small publishers now exploring that as a way to viably work with work that doesn't appeal to half the population, I guess. So I don't know. There's lots of different small publishers, from very small to quite big and quite well respected. I mean, like you've got kind of big names like Galley Press and Influx, who did fiction, and many more. But there's also, much as there has been for a long time with poetry, there's also many more even smaller presses now, and a much more connected community in a way that I think is probably a little bit vampiric on the poetry scene. I think we've learned from you guys how to collaborate and it's kind of rude nowadays if you're an experimental writer to not start a press at some point. Like you do have to do that, because it's like when you...
We've done it,
Maybe. It's like if someone invites you out to dinner, you have to... So do bear that in mind. So there's loads of opportunities.
I think there's more now than there was, say, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I feel like I've had because my first novel was published by Penguin, and then had a short story collection with Influx, and then now with Soul. But for me, going back to the question of the novel, I feel like writing a novel comes from a very different impulse to writing short stories. Like, I feel like with a novel, it's like you have a big idea and you kind of sink it. It's like kind of really, really long bath, and you say into it, you get all wrinkly and like you've forgotten about your life. Like it's more like that, or you something like an illness or something you just carry with you for a long time. It's like, and I've written I've had one novel published, but I've written like countless novels that just like have not worked, or like no one's wanting to publish them. And then like for me, short stories is much more kind of like lots of short, sharp kind of like stabs or like sudden inspiration. Like, I don't know, some of the stories in that book, it would be like, I'll just get like one idea and just like obsess over it for like a few days, and then that would be a draft done. So I feel like there's sort of different way of writing, a different way. Like I do still enjoy writing a novel and being sinking yourself into that world, but I guess it has different challenges. So that's a question.
Oh, thanks. It's been a really interesting discussion, and while the discussion was going on, there was a few kind of words, I suppose, that kind of I picked out: the story and narrative kind of discussion, and then also the kind of sense of appeal and smallness. And there was something that I noticed in like both your writings, but like in quite different ways, that there's something there, maybe not kind of narrative, but story. And you had the reference, Claire, to the very hungry caterpillar. And your character, I just had this feeling of almost like, for me, the cat in the hat, or that kind of fantasy. So I just wondered about. I haven't really got a question exactly, but I wondered if there's something about the smallness and story and that kind of. The stuff that you first start reading when we're kids before it becomes a kind of larger narrative. That's not a good question.
I think that's a great question. I think that was a lot what I kind of wanted to explore in that piece, and I think in that piece and some other creative non-fiction I've written, I'm kind of just interested in like why am I so obsessed with writing and reading? Like, why? Like, what do stories kind of give me? Like, what did they give me as a child? And I think I went back to a lot of those kind of like early experiences of like particular stories. Like, I genuinely like I would not sleep unless I'd watched Sound of Music for like several years. Like, I can't really explain why. You know, I was like, oh, there's something, like, I've always felt there's something in stories that are really like vital and like I really need, even if some of these stories seem quite like ridiculous. So I guess that was kind of interesting, that relationship between, and then stories in the body, and it's like we don't think of stories as being a physical thing, but then you consume it, it's in your body, like what happens to it, how does that kind of inform who you are? I guess that was something I was kind of interested in.
I mean, I can definitely see those themes kind of underpinning the piece. That's a big question. I don't know. I think in work that comes from the tradition that my work does, which is kind of like modernist experimentation. My original kind of academic studies have been in modernism, and I basically became aware or kind of felt like the short story hadn't really had the treatment that novels and poetry had. If you look at kind of Dubliners, say, they're quite realist Chekhovian short stories. So part of what I wanted to do was that. But when you come to modernist kind of experiment, it's never far from play. Like it's always very like jouissance and playful, and which is part of the reason why it's so much fun to work with, because you get to pun for a whole story. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, Doc. Shall we say a huge thank you to both Rosie and come and have a look at the books, buy them. I will probably can you put one aside?
I can.
Thank you guys. Thank you for coming. Just very quickly, we've got one more. It's about one more event this in 2023 December. So that will be the last Centre for Poetry and Poetics, and that will start again in February. Isabel is organising that final event with Adams. Do you want to just say a few words?
So we have Geraldine Monk coming and Michael Sanders, who is an artist, and we'll be sharing some responses to Greenham Common Peace Camp and other anti-nuclear protest, and some of the work I've done on this poetry in that period. So please do come along.
And that's
in LT2 on the Tuesday the 12th of December.
So here, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
From 5:30. All right. Thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you.
That was good. Sorry, that was amazing. Thank you. Such a head twist. I loved it.